Hi, this is Stephen from OWNorDisown. Well, today I'm reviewing the Lenovo Legion 5 Pro with the Ryzen 7 5800H and RTX 3060. Now, I bought this myself from Ant Online for about $1,400 about 1 month ago, and I see that they have actually already increased the price by $100. So is it still worth it at $1,500? Well, I would say yes. So stay tuned and I'll tell you why. Now, this model isn't available on Lenovo's website. They currently only offer the RTX 3070 model for $1,960, which initially seems to be a bit on the expensive side, but they do configure it with 2TB of storage versus just 512GB on mine. Now, prices on SSDs are getting higher now because people are mining crypto coins like Chia, so expect this situation to continue. Now, Jared's Tech reviewed the 3070 model already, and he reported that performance was negatively affected with the RAM that Lenovo used. Now, I can't say that my 3060 model, which has a max power of 130 watts, has the same issues. In Assassin's Creed Valhalla, it is actually only 5% behind the 125 watt RTX 3070 and matched the 100 watt RTX 3070 that's in the Omen 15. In Cyberpunk 2077, using Ray Tracing Ultra and DLSS set to balanced, it was 4% behind the 100 watt RTX 3070 in the Zephyrus G15. So all in all, quite good performance. Sure, in some cases like in Cyberpunk, if you want to play at the native resolution of 2560 by 1600, you'll have to set DLSS to performance, but I was still getting an average of 40 FPS. In some instances, I saw the 3060 even jumped to 145 watts, and the 5800H running at 33 watts, it ran cool at 83 degrees using performance mode. Using the Metro Exodus benchmark at 1080p with ray tracing at ultra, and also with DLSS switched on, the 3060 in the Legion 5 Pro was some 18% behind the 125 watt 3070 in the MSI GE66, but only 5% behind the 100 watt 3070 in the Omen 15. Now, for all intents and purposes, it performs like the 115 watt 2070 Super, which isn't bad when you consider that laptops with that GPU were selling for about $2,000, and this is some $500 cheaper. The Legion 5 Pro has 3 power modes, which can be conveniently switched by pressing the FN and the Q button. You have quiet, you have balanced, and you also have performance. Here's Battlefield 5 using DX11 Ultra settings at the native resolution of 2560 by 1600. I show all 3 power modes and the effect they have on the power of the 5800H and the RTX 3060, as well as the effect on their temperatures and corresponding effect on frame rates. Now, due to Dynamic Boost 2.0, where power moves between the CPU and the GPU, this will vary by game, but it should give you an idea on how it performs. In quiet mode, the 5800H sips power at 10 to 13 watts, and the 3060 only uses about 75 watts. Stepping that up to balanced and performance modes, the CPU uses 48 watts, but the GPU jumps to about 80 watts in balanced mode and 114 watts in performance mode. Now, the thermals remain good throughout, the 5800H remaining below 90 degrees, which is pretty good considering that we rely on the auto fan here. Now, I also show their respective fan noise levels. Quiet mode is only 38 decibels, so only slightly above ambient. Balanced mode isn't that much louder, to be fair, whilst you can definitely hear the fans in performance mode at 47 decibels. But they are still quieter than most gaming laptops. Now, I had no issues with coil whine, although I have heard some people that they have had that and they've called out the techs to come to the house and to take a look. I was very impressed with the frame rate. Balanced mode with fan noise, at 38 decibels, was only 8% behind the performance mode. 82 FPS ultra settings at this resolution is very good. And without a doubt, this Legion 5 Pro suits those who want to have a good gaming performance with low noise levels. Here is Overwatch using Epic settings at 2560 by 1600. Performance mode sees the CPU use only 38 watts of power, as that power is then pushed to the 3060, which uses 120 watts. The temperatures are in the mid 70s. Balance mode sees a 30 watt drop on the GPU, whilst with quiet mode we see another 15 watt drop. But even in this mode, we are getting over 60 FPS. but CPU temperatures are now only in the 50s, so if you do live in a warm climate, it is good to know that you have this as an option. Balance mode is only 10% behind performance in average frame rate, but 1% lows are the same, so I think this is a great setting to use for slightly lower thermals and much lower fan noise. At idle, the fans do stop spinning in quiet mode, so that is perfect if you are in a library or an office. The 5800H does very well, 3% slower than the 5900HS, but 6% faster than the 4800H and 17% faster than the i9-10980HK. Now you may recall that the Wi-Fi 40 had quite an ugly grille underneath, so I much prefer the cleaner look that we have here. Getting inside was a little harder than usual, as it had quite a tight fit, so I used a screwdriver in one of the screw holes to create a slight gap into which to insert my plastic tool. You have a 78 watt-hour battery, which allowed me to get 7.5 hours at 28% brightness, with the screen at 60Hz using hybrid mode, streaming YouTube. Now 28% is the default level when you switch to quiet mode, but as you can see, which is quite typical of panels used by Lenovo, the brightness drops off a cliff after 75%. Now at full brightness, the display is gorgeous, as you can see here, against the Helios 300, which in itself has a 350 nit display, and that is certainly brighter than average. Now the colour gamut is decent, as is the contrast of 980:1. And by pressing FN and R, you can actually switch the display refresh rate between 165Hz and 60Hz. And in my testing, 60Hz provides about an extra hour of juice. The Legion 5 Pro also has a mux switch, so you can choose to just use the dedicated GPU, in which case, best case of 4 hours 20 minutes. In these tests, the 5800H is very economical, using 4.5 watts, whilst I recall the 10750H in the Omen 15 was using about 12 watts. You do have dual channel RAM, 16GB, and in my unit they only have a 512GB SSD, which I feel is a little bit on the small side these days, and above that you have the Wi-Fi 6 card. At least they do have a second M.2 slot to increase your storage options. Now the heat pipes are thicker than those used on last year's Legion 5, and they do a good job moving heat to the 4 heat sinks. Here is a thermal image with the laptop under load using the performance mode. Now the hottest part of the keyboard is at 43 degrees Celsius, which isn't bad at all. Underneath, it can get to 48 degrees at the back, so I suggest for gaming use you do use a desk. Now here is the backlight bleed compared to the Helios 300, and I didn't notice any, and ghosting performance was also pretty good. This shot actually does a good job showing the extra screen you get compared to a 16:9 15.6 inch laptop. Sure, watching 16:9 content you will get black bars at the top and the bottom, but most games actually support 16:10, and if they don't, I can't say I noticed that much difference. Here is Metro Exodus at 1080p on the left and 1200p on the right. Where I did see a huge difference was actually in my editing software. Even with the 15.6 inch 1080p panel at 100% scaling, the amount of footage I can actually see in my timeline is much less than the 150% scaling on the 1600p 16:10 16 inch panel. Comparing the keyboard deck against the 15.6 inch Helios 300, you do actually see that despite a 16 inch frame, the Legion 5 Pro is actually not as deep as the Helios. Now Dave2D criticised the trackpad position, but as you can see it is exactly the same as the Helios 300. Also, he said you would constantly activate the trackpad with your wrist as you type. Well, I never had that issue at all, and even rubbing my wrist on it saw no activation. The deck and trackpad are made out of plastic, but they do feel good quality. The keys are pretty decent as well, and in addition to the FNR and FNQ shortcuts I mentioned previously, you can press FN and L to turn on and off the lighting of the lid logo. Now Dave also criticised the logo and that it looking a little bit gamery, and I don't think it looks too bad at all. And if you want a cleaner look, you can always opt for the Legion 5. Now my biggest complaint is probably the large 300 watt brick. They could have gone with a 230 watt one, but I expect they want to use the same brick across all of their lineup, which includes the Legion 7 with a 165 watt 3080. Now this brick does add to its total travel weight, which comes in at 7 pounds 14 ounces or 3.6 kilos. I didn't notice any clicking from the hinges, and they were nice and stiff. I'd say all in all the build quality is good. So the webcam is located up top at 720p, so it's not the sharpest, but it does okay. And I do like the microphone, it's nice and clear, and of course the fans are nice and quiet as well. And this is what it's like, when you're typing. The speakers have average loudness, but they don't sound tinny and are pleasant to use. And also, if you plan to use it for real-time audio, I did find that it failed my latency test when using Wi-Fi, but it did pass when it was connected via Ethernet. On the left, you have a USB-C port and a combo headphone mic jack. And on the right, you have a switch to disable the webcam and another USB-A. Now most of the ports are around the back. You can actually also charge it using the USB-C port. The symbols on the back do help when you want to see which port is which when viewing from above. I just wish they were lit up like on the Legion 7. You have 3 more USB-As, the Ethernet and HDMI port, and also the rectangular power connector. And I like this as it keeps the side of the laptop relatively clear of cables. In the BIOS, you can set it so that it powers up just by opening the lid, and you can also overclock the GPU, saving you from having to launch Afterburner. So how would I sum up the Legion 5 Pro? Well, for me the standout feature is the 16:10 16-inch screen that is nice and bright. When viewed alongside a 15.6-inch 16:9, I can see what I was missing. For my video editing, it is ideal, although I do wish it did have an SD card reader, so the new Acer Triton 500 SE looks particularly appealing. I thought the thermals were very good, especially when you consider that fan noise is quite low. Gaming performance is just ahead of the 105W 3060 in the Gigabyte G5 and just behind the 100W 3070 in the Omen 15, which sells for $250 more. I thought battery life was pretty decent, and you can charge it with a smaller USB-C power brick if you are travelling. At $1,500 it is still pretty decent value, especially when you consider you have Gysnc and Freesync, plus a mux switch, which many, if not all the recent ASUS laptops lack, which will affect the frame rates on those. Now the 3070 model for $1,960 does seem a little bit expensive to me. I think if that was $100 less, it would be perfectly fine. Plus, as Jared reported, its performance may be impacted by its RAM. Now I do have the RTX 3060 Legion 7 in-house, so make sure you subscribe to catch that video. Thank you for watching. Bye now.